Hello, welcome back to Zero Production Value Movie Reviews. I'm Eric Hoernke, and today I'm going to be discussing the 2004 film Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, directed by Alfonso Cuaron. So this is year 3 for Harry Potter and Friends. This was the first film in the series not directed by Chris Columbus. At first, Cuaron would seem like an odd choice. He wasn't a very well-known director at the time. He had just a few years previous directed the critical darling Tu Mama Tambien, which is kind of about as far away from Harry Potter as you could get, although if you look at it, there is connective tissue, as it does deal with adolescent male aging, the kind of teen angst, although in a very different way than Harry Potter deals with it. Supposedly J.K. Rowling had seen that film and thought very highly of it, and somehow that also was how he wound up on the short list of directors to helm this film. So he brings a much more mature, darker look to this film, which sort of also parallels the maturing of the characters and the maturing of the storyline. So it ultimately works out very well, and his independent spirit seems to just infuse the production. He winds up being a very vital injection of sort of fresh energy to keep this franchise from getting stale. This seems to be the first in the series that doesn't deal directly with Vooldemort as sort of a primary or even really a tangential villain, although we are introduced to Sirius Black, played by the incomparable Gary Oldman, who is supposedly a devout follower of Vooldemort, and in one of the primary storylines, at least as far as it sets up, is we learn that this Sirius Black character was once friends of Harry's parents, and he supposedly betrayed them and murdered them, and subsequently was captured and placed in the infamous Azkaban Prison, which seems to be the holding pen of choice for magical types. This also allows us to get our first glimpses of the Dementors of Azkaban, who are in this movie throughout. They are wonderfully realized on screen. They're not really explained in the movie super well, other than that they're the supernatural guardians, prison guards of Azkaban. But they have a very dark, grim reaper look, and it's told to us that they don't really discern between their quarry and those who get in their way of their quarry. So they toe the line of almost being evil themselves, or maybe above concerns such as good and evil, and they can actually do what is called a Dementor's kiss, which is suck out the soul of prey, essentially. This is the third year, and once again, like I said before, in a running almost gag in Harry Potter, we get our third defense against the dark arts teacher, Professor Remus Lupin, played by David Thewlis. He gives some very timely training to the young kids in Harry Potter in specific on defense against certain malevolent forces in the form of a petronus charm that a wizard can conjure to basically shoo away dark forces, dark energy, or keep them at bay. And Professor Lupin himself is harboring a dark secret or two that is not so thinly veiled as his story plays out. And if you can't figure it out on your own, the name should be a dead giveaway. It also is interesting. The timeliness of this reminds me of the timeliness of things that appear in the Harry Potter stories. At least as far as the movies are concerned, we seem to get things, and it makes sense. Like as the narrative progresses, they just sort of put in things that allow them to that they can then use in the narrative. For example, Hermione's magical charm bauble that she gets, or the Patronus charm, or the Marauder's map, all very timely events. If you look back to the Chamber of Secrets, they're going through their, I forget what the class is, with Madame Pomfrey, and they got the little screaming mandrake plants that allow people to be disenchanted from being petrified. And of course we have a petrification storyline, so that they have this timeliness of learning things that they can then use, throughout the course of the narrative, which is interesting. So we have some additional new faces in the form of Emma Thompson playing Professor Trelawney, who's a divination teacher. In this, she's portrayed mainly as just sort of a kooky weirdo, despite certain moments of precognitive clarity, shall we say. And on a sad note, we do get our only real major cast member change throughout the course of the entire series, which is something to be applauded, and it's quite amazing actually. But Richard Harris passed away shortly after the second film was released, and thus the very capable Michael Gambon steps into the role of Dumbledore. And he doesn't do like a Richard Harris impersonation, but it really feels like somewhat of a seamless transition. He does it subtly differently, adds his own sort of spin on it, but he seems a bit more playful in his version, but no less commanding in the way that he portrays the character. And then, not really a character, but as I mentioned, the Marauder's map shows up, which is a very important artifact for Harry Potter. It's an interesting map that was put together, and it shows the location of everybody in Hogwarts in real time, and it can be hidden by saying a little chant. But it's an extremely powerful thing for him to have, and like I said, the timeliness of it comes into play very importantly in this narrative. So this third story has a much more nuanced plot construction, and it's also a bit more serious. Maybe a bit of a pun intended there. The film's climactic sequence is a slick, well choreographed sequence involving time travel, and it's put together really well that you might be able to see it coming, but it plays out so slickly that it's just really well put together, and it works really well. And sometimes time travel can just sort of trip over itself, but here it really doesn't, and it works well. And then also the way they set up the Sirius Black storyline, I don't know if anybody really buys the red herring that they sort of put out there, but the way they set it up and then subvert expectations, I thought was really well done, even though even reading the book, I didn't really buy the initial premise. I kind of had an idea of where they were going to go with the character, shall we say. The special effects here they just increase with each movie, and this one again takes a leap forward in the effects. Mainly the Dementors and the magic, although sometimes, like for example the Hippogriff, there's times at which it looks amazing, and then times where it just looks a little like too much. So it's still a little give and take. But I believe that this third film, not only in effects, and it also got nominated for an Oscar for its effects. It only got 2 Oscar nominations, one for visual effects, and then one for the music, the score, which, like I've said, I think I said in the first film review, John Williams does the score here, so that's pretty much a set it and forget it. I mean, John Williams. You don't really need to say anything more. But this film takes a leap forward in intelligence and maturity, but it also keeps the core Harry Potter heart. Like, they're still at that point where they're kids. This is sort of a transitional story. I think of the first two as kind of these sort of kid stories and a lot of setup. And then Azkaban and Goblet of Fire, which is the next one, are kind of more transitional. As you can see, their burgeoning maturity, and they mature in leaps and bounds over the next two before getting into the final run of films that is really kind of the overall story arc, which involves Harry and Voldemort and that huge confrontation. But we're still in the early stages, so we still get the auspice of the school year for things to play out. The kids are still young enough to, enjoy going to classes, and they don't have too many other overriding concerns. All the kids and the cast members at this point, they can slip into their roles with like a comfortable ease, and that easiness just portrays itself even more on screen as they sort of inhabit these roles even more. It's also an important step forward for Harry personally, as his family situation sort of alters somewhat, shall we say. He still struggles with the death of his parents, but he struggled with not only that death, but also the loneliness that has spawned from them being gone, and him trying to find out where he fits in this world, because it very clearly isn't with the Dursleys, although they represent his sole family structure. So he gets a little bit more data and more to go on as far as his family scenario, shall we say. But I think in every way this film is basically a triumph, and it's nice to see that not only with the story, but with the filmic elements, that they keep finding creative peaks and ways to push it forward. So it's not just a stagnating series that just goes from a connect the dots, story progression and film progression, which I feel that if they would have kept the same filmmaker throughout the entire run, that it would have been just a little bit stale. But like I said, with the addition of Cuaron and changing these directors up, and also just the kind of the amping up of the story, which is a credit to Rowling herself for, understanding that as the kids mature, the stories need to mature. But I loved it. It's I think regarded as one of people's favorite of the series. It's one of my favorite of the series. So for all that, I am going to give Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban an A-. I love you. I appreciate you. Thanks for watching my movie review. I really enjoyed doing it. Like, subscribe, ring the bell. As always, I'm Eric Hoernke, rhymes with turnkey, and this has been a production of Zero Value.